The blood-red sun dipped below the distant mountains as Zara Palmer's wagon teetered on the edge of disaster, a single wheel spinning uselessly in the air while the splintered axle groaned against the weight of her worldly possessions. It was 1849, the height of the California gold rush, and Zara, like thousands of others, had been drawn west by whispers of fortune and the promise of a new beginning. Now, as her wagon slipped inch by inch into the yawning ravine along the treacherous mountain pass just outside Coloma, California, those dreams seemed as precarious as her current predicament. "Steady there," a deep voice called from somewhere behind her. "Don't move an inch." Zara froze, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the wagon seat. The horses whinnied nervously, sensing the danger. The last remnants of daylight cast long shadows across the narrow trail, and Zara's heart hammered in her chest as loose rocks skittered down the steep incline beneath her wagon. "Who's there?" she called, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. 24 years old and traveling alone since Sacramento, Zara had learned quickly that the frontier was no place for displays of weakness. A figure appeared at the edge of the trail, a tall man astride a chestnut stallion. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat, but Zara could make out a strong jawline covered in several days' worth of stubble. "Name's Cooper Walsh," he said, dismounting with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent most of his life on horseback. "Looks like you've got yourself in a mighty difficult situation, madam." "I can manage," Zara replied automatically, even as she felt the wagon shift another inch toward the ravine. Her entire body tensed. Cooper's expression remained impassive as he assessed the situation. "With all due respect, madam, you're about 10 seconds away from taking a very unpleasant tumble." Without waiting for permission, he began moving carefully down the slope, navigating the loose scree with the sure-footedness of a mountain goat. Zara watched, mesmerized despite her fear, as he made his way to the precariously balanced wagon. Up close, she could see that his eyes were a startling blue against his sun-weathered skin. A scar ran along his left cheekbone, and his hands were calloused from years of hard work. "The axle's broken clean through," he announced after examining the underside of the wagon, "and this whole side is about to give way." As if to emphasize his point, the wagon lurched again, and Zara bit back a scream. Cooper moved to stand directly below her. "You need to get out of there now," he said, his voice calm but brooking no argument. He extended his arm upward, his expression resolute. "Give me your hand." Zara hesitated, years of her father's warnings about trusting strangers echoing in her mind. But as another shower of rocks cascaded down the ravine and the wagon creaked ominously, she knew she had little choice. "My belongings," she started. "We'll worry about them after you're safe," Cooper interrupted. "Now give me your hand before it's too late." Swallowing her pride, Zara reached down. His hand clasped firmly around hers, warm, strong, and surprisingly gentle. With a swift, powerful movement, he pulled her from the wagon seat just as the vehicle gave a final groan and began its descent into the ravine. The momentum sent them both tumbling to the ground. Cooper twisted mid-fall, taking the brunt of the impact on his back with Zara landing on his chest. For a moment, they lay there, breathless, the sound of the wagon crashing down the ravine filling the air. "Are you hurt?" Cooper asked, his voice a rumble beneath her ear. Zara quickly pushed herself up, a flush creeping into her cheeks at their improper proximity. "No, I'm fine." She brushed dirt from her skirts, trying to regain her composure. "But everything I own was in that wagon." Cooper stood and offered her a hand up, which she reluctantly accepted. "We can salvage what we can come morning," he said, glancing down the darkening ravine. "It's too dangerous now, night's falling fast." "We Zara questioned, arching an eyebrow. A ghost of a smile crossed Cooper's face. Unless you've got another plan. Zara looked around at the desolate mountain pass. The nearest town was Coloma, at least half a day's ride away, and night was rapidly approaching. Her provisions, her clothes, her father's pocket watch, everything was at the bottom of that ravine. I suppose I don't, she admitted reluctantly. Cooper nodded, seeming unsurprised. I've got a camp set up about a mile back. It's not much, but there's food and shelter. He gestured to his horse, which was calmly grazing at the edge of the trail. Samson here is strong enough to carry us both. Zara straightened her spine. Mr. Walsh, I hardly know you. It wouldn't be proper, miss. He questioned, waiting for her to supply her name. Palmer, Zara Palmer. Miss Palmer out here, propriety takes a backseat to survival. You're welcome to stay and guard what's left of your wagon, but I wouldn't recommend it. Mountain lions get mighty curious after sundown. As if on cue, a distant howl echoed through the mountains. Zara suppressed a shiver. Very well, she conceded. But I insist on paying you for your trouble once we reach Coloma. Cooper's expression remained neutral as he led her to his horse. We can discuss that later. For now, let's focus on getting somewhere safe. He helped her mount Samson before swinging up behind her. Zara stiffened at the proximity, but the alternative, spending the night alone on this treacherous pass, was far worse. As they rode in silence, the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the mountains, and stars began to pepper the vast sky. Zara found herself acutely aware of Cooper's presence, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his chest against her back, the way his arms encircled her as he held the reins. "What brings you to these parts, Miss Palmer?" Cooper asked, breaking the silence. "Gold fever like the rest of them," Zara hesitated before answering. "Not exactly. I'm looking for someone." "Family? No," she said simply, offering no further explanation. Cooper seemed to sense her reluctance. "Fair enough. We've all got our reasons for being out here." They rode in silence for a while longer before Cooper spoke again. "That's it up ahead." Zara peered through the darkness to see a small campfire flickering between a cluster of pine trees. As they drew closer, she could make out a simple canvas tent and the silhouette of another horse tethered nearby. Cooper dismounted first, then reached up to help Zara down. His hands lingered on her waist a moment longer than necessary, and Zara felt a strange flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with hunger or fatigue. "It's not much," Cooper said, gesturing to the modest camp, "but it's dry and the fire keeps the animals away." "It's more than I would have had otherwise," Zara admitted. "Thank you." Cooper nodded and busied himself with tending to Samson while Zara approached the fire, grateful for its warmth as the night air grew chill. She watched as Cooper moved with quiet efficiency, removing the saddle and brushing down his horse before joining her by the fire. "Hungry?" he asked, reaching for a pot nestled in the coals. "Starving," Zara confessed, suddenly realizing she hadn't eaten since midday. Cooper ladled some stew into a tin bowl and handed it to her along with a spoon. "It's just beans and venison, nothing fancy. It smells wonderful." Zara took a bite and closed her eyes briefly in appreciation. "And tastes even better." A hint of a smile played at the corners of Cooper's mouth as he served himself. They ate in companionable silence, the crackling of the fire and distant night sounds of the wilderness the only backdrop to their meal. "So," Cooper said finally, setting his empty bowl aside. "Who are you looking for in Coloma?" Zara hesitated, running her finger along the rim of her bowl. "A man named Daniel Blackwell. He has something that belongs to me." Cooper's expression darkened slightly. "Blackwell, the mine owner, you know him." "Of him," Cooper corrected. "He owns the largest claim outside Coloma, has a reputation for being ruthless." Zara's jaw tightened. Yes, that sounds like him. Cooper studied her for a moment, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. Whatever business you have with him, be careful. Men like Blackwell didn't get where they are by playing fair. I'm well aware, Zara said, her voice hardening. But I didn't come all the way from Boston to turn back now. Cooper raised an eyebrow at this but didn't press further. Instead, he stood and retrieved a bedroll from his tent. You can take the tent, he said, laying the bedroll near the fire. I'll sleep out here. I couldn't possibly. I insist, Cooper said firmly. Besides, I prefer the open air. Zara wanted to argue, but exhaustion was rapidly overtaking her. The events of the day, the broken wagon, the near disaster at the ravine, meeting this enigmatic cowboy had left her drained. Thank you, she said simply, rising to her feet. For everything. Cooper nodded, his expression unreadable in the flickering firelight. Get some rest, Miss Palmer. Tomorrow we'll see what can be salvaged from your wagon, then head to Coloma. Inside the small tent, Zara removed her boots and outer layers before lying down on Cooper's bedroll. It smelled of leather, pine, and something distinctly masculine that she found oddly comforting. As she drifted towards sleep, Zara found herself wondering about the mysterious Cooper Walsh, what had brought him to this lonely mountain pass, what had caused the scar on his face, and why a man who clearly preferred solitude had gone out of his way to help a stranger. Morning came with the cheerful chirping of birds and sunlight filtering through the canvas tent. For a moment, Zara was disoriented, forgetting where she was. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back, and she sat up quickly, running her fingers through her tangled auburn hair. Outside, she found Cooper already awake, tending to a fresh fire with coffee brewing in a small pot. He looked up as she emerged, nodding in greeting. "Sleep well?" he asked, pouring coffee into a tin cup. "Better than expected," Zara admitted, accepting the cup gratefully. The coffee was strong and bitter, but welcome after the chill of the morning air. "What time is it?" "Just past dawn," Cooper replied, glancing at the sun. "If we leave now, we can check your wagon and still make it to Coloma by midday." They broke camp efficiently, with Zara helping to pack up the tent and cooking supplies. Within half an hour, they were mounted on Samson and heading back toward the ravine where her wagon had fallen. In the daylight, the damage was even more evident. The wagon had tumbled nearly 50 feet down, coming to rest against a cluster of boulders. It was a splintered mess, the canvas cover torn and most of the contents scattered across the rocky slope. Cooper tethered Samson to a nearby tree and surveyed the scene. "It's going to be tricky getting down there," he observed, "but not impossible." "I can do it," Zara insisted, already gathering her skirts to prepare for the descent. Cooper gave her an appraising look, then nodded. "Stay close and follow my path. The ground's unstable." Together they made their way down the ravine, Cooper occasionally extending a hand to help Zara over particularly treacherous spots. When they reached the wagon, Zara's heart sank. Most of her belongings were damaged beyond repair, clothes soiled and torn, books waterlogged from a nearby stream, kitchenware dented and scattered. "My trunk," she said suddenly, spotting a large wooden chest that had been thrown clear of the wagon. "It might still be intact." They made their way to the trunk, and Zara let out a relieved breath when she found it largely undamaged, though the lock had broken off in the fall. Inside were her most precious possessions, a daguerreotype of her parents, her father's pocket watch, a small pouch of coins, and most importantly, a leather portfolio containing papers that were the very reason for her journey to Coloma. "Thank goodness," she murmured, clutching the portfolio to her chest. Cooper had been salvaging what he could from the wagon, a few cooking utensils, some canned goods, a wool blanket that had somehow remained dry. "Is there anything else worth saving?" he asked. Zara glanced around at the wreckage of her former life and shook her head. Just the trunk. Everything else can stay. With considerable effort, they managed to haul the trunk up the ravine, Cooper bearing most of the weight. By the time they secured it to Samson's back, the sun was high in the sky and both were sweating from exertion. "We should reach Coloma by early afternoon," Cooper said, offering Zara his canteen. "There's a decent boarding house there where you can stay." Zara took a long drink of water, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look, her hair falling from its pins, her dress smudged with dirt, her hands scraped raw from climbing over rocks. "I must look a fright," she said, attempting to smooth her skirts. Cooper's eyes met hers, and for a moment, something passed between them, something warm and unexpected. "You look like a woman who survived what would have killed most," he said simply. The compliment, delivered so matter-of-factly, caught Zara off guard. She felt a blush rise to her cheeks and quickly busied herself with retying her bonnet. They rode in comfortable silence for most of the journey, the rugged mountain terrain gradually giving way to gentler foothills. As they crested a ridge, Coloma came into view below a bustling town nestled in a valley alongside the American River. "There it is," Cooper said, reining Samson to a stop so they could take in the view. Zara gazed down at the town that represented both the end of her journey and the beginning of her real purpose here. Smoke rose from dozens of chimneys, and even from this distance, she could make out the activity along the river where men hunched over pans, searching for gold. "It's larger than I expected," she commented. "It's grown since '48, Cooper replied. "When gold was first discovered at Sutter's Mill, this was just a small settlement. Now," he gestured at the sprawling town below, "now it's the heart of gold country." As they descended into Coloma, the sounds and smells of civilization enveloped them, the clanging of a blacksmith's hammer, the aroma of baking bread from a bakery, the shouts of children playing in the dusty street. After days on the trail, the bustle of the town was almost overwhelming to Zara's senses. Cooper guided them to a 2-story wooden building with a sign proclaiming it as Mrs. Holloway's boarding house. He dismounted and helped Zara down, then began untying her trunk from Samson's back. "This is where we part ways, Miss Palmer," he said, setting the trunk on the boardwalk. "Mrs. Holloway runs a respectable establishment. You'll be safe here." Zara felt a strange reluctance to say goodbye to this man who had quite literally saved her life. "Mr. Walsh, I don't know how to thank you properly." Cooper shook his head. "No thanks necessary. Anyone would have done the same." "We both know that's not true," Zara said softly. "Please at least let me pay you for your trouble." A flash of something, perhaps pride, perhaps hurt, crossed Cooper's face. "I didn't help you for payment, Miss Palmer." "Nevertheless," Zara insisted, reaching for the pouch of coins in her trunk. Cooper stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. "If you truly wish to thank me, perhaps you could join me for supper this evening. There's a decent eating house down the street." The invitation surprised her, though not unpleasantly. "I would like that," she found herself saying before propriety could intervene. A smile, the first genuine one she'd seen from him, brightened Cooper's face. "I'll call for you at 6 then." After Cooper had departed, leading Samson toward the livery stable, Zara entered Mrs. Holloway's boarding house. The proprietress, a plump, gray-haired woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, greeted her warmly. "My dear, you look like you've had quite a journey," Mrs. Holloway observed, taking in Zara's disheveled appearance. "Let's get you settled in a room and then I'll have a hot bath sent up." The promise of a bath was enough to make Zara forget her exhaustion. Her room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the main street of Coloma. After helping the boarding house staff bring up the copper tub and fill it with steaming water, Mrs. Holloway left Zara to her privacy. Sinking into the hot water, Zara closed her eyes and allowed herself a moment of pure indulgence. The past weeks had been a whirlwind: the hasty departure from Boston after her father's death, the long journey west, and now the loss of her wagon. Yet somehow, she felt closer to her goal than ever. As she washed away the dirt of the trail, Zara's thoughts drifted to Cooper Walsh. There was something compelling about the quiet cowboy with his intense blue eyes and careful manner. He was unlike any man she had met in Boston's refined society circles, rougher, certainly, but also more genuine. After her bath, Zara dressed in one of the few outfits she had managed to salvage from the trunk, a simple blue dress that had been her traveling attire before the wagon accident. It was wrinkled but clean, and with her hair freshly washed and arranged in a simple knot at the nape of her neck, she looked presentable enough for an evening meal. At precisely 6 o'clock, there was a knock at her door. When Zara opened it, she momentarily failed to recognize Cooper. Gone was the trail-worn cowboy. In his place stood a clean-shaven gentleman in a pressed shirt and dark vest. His hair, damp from a recent washing, was combed neatly, revealing more of his handsome face than the shadowed cowboy had it allowed. "Mr. Walsh," she said, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. A hint of self-consciousness crossed his features. "Miss Palmer," he replied with a slight nod. "You look—" He paused, seeming to search for the right word. "Refreshed." Zara couldn't help but smile at the awkward compliment. "As do you. I hardly recognized you without a layer of trail dust." This drew a chuckle from Cooper, the sound rich and warm. "I clean up decently when the occasion calls for it." He offered her his arm, and together they descended the stairs and stepped out into the evening air of Coloma. The town was alive with activity: miners fresh from the river, merchants closing up shops, ladies and gentlemen promenading along the boardwalks. "The Goldfield dining room is just down the street," Cooper said, guiding her through the bustling thoroughfare. "Best food in town, according to local opinion." The restaurant was crowded but cozy, with tablecloths and actual glass windows, luxuries that spoke of Coloma's prosperity. Cooper secured them a small table near the back, and a waiter promptly brought menus and water. "Order whatever you like," Cooper insisted. "After trail rations, you deserve a proper meal." Zara chose the roast chicken while Cooper selected the steak. As they waited for their food, an awkward silence fell between them, the easy camaraderie of the trail suddenly giving way to the more formal setting of the dining room. "So," Zara began, desperate to break the silence, "what brings you to Coloma, Mr. Walsh? Are you a miner?" Cooper shook his head. "No, though I've tried my hand at it. These days I work as a guide and scout. Prospectors hire me to lead them to promising locations, help them set up camp, that sort of thing." "That explains why you're so comfortable in the wilderness," Zara observed. "And what about you, Miss Palmer?" Cooper asked, his blue eyes studying her with interest. "You mentioned you're from Boston. That's a long way to travel alone, especially for a lady." Zara hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "My father passed away 3 months ago," she said finally. "I discovered among his papers evidence that he had invested in a mining operation here in Coloma. The man I mentioned, Daniel Blackwell, was his partner." Cooper's expression darkened at the mention of Blackwell. "And you've come to claim your father's share." "Precisely," Zara said, grateful for his quick understanding. "According to the partnership agreement, my father owned 40% of the Sunrise mine. After his death, that share should have passed to me as his sole heir." Their food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. Zara took a bite of the succulent chicken, closing her eyes briefly in appreciation of the first properly cooked meal she'd had in weeks. "Have you contacted Blackwell yet?" Cooper asked after they had eaten in silence for a few moments. Zara shook her head. "No. I thought it best to arrive unannounced. From what I've gathered, Mr. Blackwell has a reputation for creative bookkeeping." Cooper let out a dry laugh. "That's one way of putting it. Another would be outright theft." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Miss Palmer, I don't mean to alarm you, but Daniel Blackwell isn't known for his fairness or honesty. Men who have challenged him have had unfortunate accidents." A chill ran down Zara's spine, but she lifted her chin determinedly. "Are you suggesting I abandon my claim?" "No," Cooper replied, holding her gaze steadily. "I'm suggesting you proceed with caution, and perhaps not alone." The implication hung in the air between them. Zara took a sip of water, considering his words. "Are you offering your assistance, Mr. Walsh? I know Blackwell's operation. I've guided men to claims near his property, observed his methods." Cooper's expression was serious. "If you're determined to confront him, I'd feel better knowing you had someone watching your back." Zara studied him, trying to understand his motivation. "Why would you do this? You hardly know me." Cooper was silent for a long moment, absently tracing the rim of his water glass with a finger. "Let's just say I've had my own dealings with Blackwell. I have no love for the man." There was something in his tone, a personal edge that suggested this was more than simple dislike. Zara wanted to press further but sensed he wouldn't elaborate. "Very well," she said finally. "I'd welcome your assistance, Mr. Walsh. I plan to visit Blackwell's office tomorrow morning." Cooper nodded, seeming relieved by her acceptance. "I'll meet you at the boarding house at 9. The rest of their meal passed pleasantly, the conversation turning to lighter topics. Zara told Cooper about growing up in Boston, the daughter of a successful merchant who had invested heavily in Western ventures. Cooper, in turn, shared stories of his years in the wilderness encounters with bears, navigating snowbound mountain passes, the characters he'd met along the way. By the time they finished their dessert, apple pie that rivaled any Zara had tasted in Boston, she found herself genuinely enjoying Cooper's company. Beneath his reserved exterior was a thoughtful, intelligent man with a dry wit that occasionally caught her by surprise. As they walked back to the boarding house, the streets of Coloma had quieted somewhat, though light and music still spilled from the various saloons. Cooper kept a respectful distance as they walked side by side, but Zara was acutely aware of his presence, the subtle scent of soap and leather, the confident stride, the way he positioned himself between her and the rowdier establishments they passed. At the boarding house steps, they paused. The moment felt weighted somehow, as if standing on the threshold of something neither had anticipated. "Thank you for the meal," Zara said, suddenly feeling shy. "And for agreeing to help me tomorrow." Cooper nodded, his eyes reflecting the soft glow of the lantern hanging beside the door. "It was my pleasure, Miss Palmer." "Zara," she said impulsively. "Please call me Zara." A smile touched the corners of his mouth. "Zara," he repeated, her name sounding different in his deep voice. "Then you must call me Cooper." "Cooper," she echoed, liking the way it felt to say his name. "Good night, then." "Good night, Zara," he replied softly. "I'll see you in the morning." For a moment neither moved, caught in some unspoken current between them. Then Cooper tipped his hat slightly and turned, walking back toward the livery where he'd arranged lodging for the night. Zara watched him go, a curious warmth spreading through her chest despite the cool evening air. Only when his figure disappeared around a corner did she finally enter the boarding house, her mind already turning to the confrontation that awaited her tomorrow and the enigmatic cowboy who had unexpectedly become her ally. The morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through Zara's window and casting golden patterns across the simple wooden floor. She dressed with care in her most businesslike attire, a dark green traveling suit that, while slightly creased from its time in the trunk, still conveyed a sense of propriety and purpose. Her father's pocket watch, polished to a gleam, was pinned to her lapel as both a functional accessory and a silent reminder of why she had come. In her leather portfolio, Zara had arranged the documents that proved her claim, the partnership agreement between Edward Palmer and Daniel Blackwell, dated 1847, letters from Blackwell reporting on the mine's progress, and her father's will, naming her as his sole beneficiary. Armed with these papers and her own determination, Zara felt ready to face whatever resistance Blackwell might offer. At precisely 9 o'clock, a knock sounded at her door. Cooper stood in the hallway, once again looking more the respectable citizen than the rugged trailsman she had first encountered. His expression was serious as he greeted her. "Are you ready?" he asked simply. Zara nodded, clutching her portfolio. "As ready as I'll ever be." Together they left the boarding house and made their way through Coloma's morning bustle toward the business district. Cooper explained that Blackwell maintained an office on the second floor of the Miners' Exchange building, above the assayer's office where gold was weighed and valued. "He's usually there in the mornings, overseeing the day's operations before heading out to the mine," Cooper informed her as they approached a substantial brick building near the center of town. Zara paused at the entrance, suddenly hesitant. The reality of what she was about to do, confront one of the most powerful men in Coloma and demand her rightful inheritance, momentarily overwhelmed her. Cooper seemed to sense her trepidation. "Remember," he said quietly, "this is your legal right. You have nothing to be ashamed or afraid of." Drawing strength from his confidence, Zara straightened her spine and nodded. "Let's proceed." The Miners' Exchange was a hub of activity, with prospectors lined up at the assayer's counter, clerks scurrying about with ledgers, and well-dressed men conducting business in hushed tones near the large windows. Cooper guided Zara to a staircase at the back of the building, which led to a narrow hallway with several doors. At the end was an imposing oak door with Sunrise Mining Company D. Blackwell, proprietor, painted in gold lettering. Cooper knocked firmly. After a moment, a muffled voice called, "Enter." The office beyond was surprisingly spacious, with large windows overlooking the bustling main street of Coloma. Maps of mining claims lined the walls, and a large desk dominated the center of the room. Behind it sat Daniel Blackwell. He was older than Zara had expected, perhaps in his 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and shrewd eyes that assessed them coldly as they entered. He wore an expensive suit, and a gold watch chain draped across his substantial belly. "Mr. Walsh," Blackwell said, his tone suggesting he was neither pleased nor surprised by Cooper's appearance. His gaze shifted to Zara, running over her with an evaluating glance that made her skin crawl. "And who might this be?" Before Cooper could speak, Zara stepped forward. "I am Zara Palmer, daughter of Edward Palmer. I believe you were in business with my father." A flicker of something recognition, perhaps concern, crossed Blackwell's face before his expression smoothed into polite inquiry. "Edward Palmer. Ah, yes, a Boston investor. I was sorry to hear of his passing." He gestured to the chairs in front of his desk. "Please sit. What brings Edward Palmer's daughter all the way to Coloma?" Zara remained standing, unwilling to cede even that small advantage. "I think you know exactly why I'm here, Mr. Blackwell. My father was your partner in the Sunrise Mine. According to your partnership agreement, he owned 40% of the operation." Blackwell's expression hardened slightly. "That was some time ago, Miss Palmer. The situation has, Evolved since then. Evolved. Zara repeated, opening her portfolio and extracting the partnership document. This agreement has no termination clause. It explicitly states that in the event of either partner's death, their share passes to their heirs. She placed the document on Blackwell's desk. He glanced at it dismissively. Business arrangements in the goldfields are fluid, Miss Palmer. Your father ceased to be actively involved in the mine's operations shortly after this agreement was signed. He failed to contribute to subsequent capital calls, effectively diluting his ownership to a negligible percentage. That's a lie, Zara said flatly, producing another document. Here are receipts for all capital contributions requested, with your signature acknowledging receipt. Blackwell's expression darkened. His eyes flicked briefly to Cooper, who had remained standing just behind Zara, then back to her. Miss Palmer, mining is a complicated business. There are expenses, losses, complex accounting matters, which is why I'd like to review the books, Zara interrupted, her voice steady despite her racing heart. As a legal owner of 40% of the Sunrise mine, I have that right. A tense silence fell over the office. Blackwell's fingers drummed once, twice on the polished surface of his desk. Finally, he forced a thin smile. Of course, you have that right. However, our bookkeeper is currently indisposed. Perhaps if you return next week, tomorrow will be sufficient, Zara said firmly, and I'll be bringing my own accountant to assist with the review. Blackwell's smile vanished. You seem determined to make this difficult, Miss Palmer. Not at all, Zara replied evenly. I'm simply claiming what is legally mine. Blackwell stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. Very well. Tomorrow at 10. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have pressing business at the mine. He gathered some papers from his desk, deliberately ignoring the documents Zara had presented, and strode to the door. Before exiting, he paused and turned back, his gaze now fixed on Cooper. Walsh, he said, his voice carrying a clear warning, you're involving yourself in matters that don't concern you. I'd reconsider if I were you. Cooper's expression remained impassive. I'll keep that in mind. After Blackwell departed, Zara released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Well, that went about as expected. Cooper moved to the window, watching as Blackwell emerged from the building below and mounted a waiting horse. He'll try to hide the true value of the mine, he said thoughtfully. Falsify records, claim expenses that never existed. I anticipated as much, Zara replied, gathering her documents and returning them to her portfolio. That's why I need to find an honest accountant in town, someone Blackwell doesn't already have in his pocket. Cooper turned to face her, his expression serious. Zara, there's something you should know about Blackwell. His methods go beyond creative bookkeeping. Men who have crossed him have had accidents at the mine, disappeared during hunting trips, been found floating in the river. A chill ran down Zara's spine, but she lifted her chin defiantly. Are you suggesting I should give up? Let him steal what's rightfully mine? No, Cooper said firmly. I'm suggesting we need to be careful, and we need allies. They left the miners' exchange and walked in thoughtful silence down Coloma's main street. The town was fully awake now, with merchants hawking their wares, wagons delivering supplies, and the constant background noise of picks and shovels from the nearby riverbanks where hopeful miners continued their search for gold. I know someone who might help, Cooper said finally. Samuel Thornton. He was the town's schoolmaster before the gold rush brought enough families to warrant a proper school. Now he does accounting work for several of the smaller mining operations. He's honest, and he has no love for Blackwell. Can we trust him? Zara asked. Cooper nodded. With our lives, if necessary. And in this case, it might be. They found Samuel Thornton in a small office near the church, a thin, bespectacled man with a serious demeanor that softened considerably when he recognized Cooper Walsh. He exclaimed, rising from his desk to shake Cooper's hand warmly. "It's been months. I thought you'd gone north with that expedition to the Feather River." "Changed my plans," Cooper replied with a slight smile. He gestured to Zara. "Sam, this is Miss Zara Palmer. She needs your help with a delicate matter involving Daniel Blackwell." Thornton's expression immediately grew cautious. "Blackwell? What sort of help?" Over the next hour, Zara explained her situation, while Thornton examined her documents with the meticulous attention of someone accustomed to finding discrepancies in fine print. When she finished, the accountant removed his spectacles and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Miss Palmer, your claim appears entirely legitimate," he said slowly. "But challenging Blackwell is, well, it's dangerous." "So I've been told," Zara replied grimly. "Nevertheless, I intend to proceed. Will you help me?" Thornton glanced at Cooper, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Yes," the accountant said finally. "I'll help you, but we'll need to be thorough and careful. Blackwell is not only dangerous, he's clever." They spent the remainder of the morning developing a strategy for the next day's meeting. Thornton explained what financial records they should request and what discrepancies to look for. By noon, they had a comprehensive plan of action. "I should warn you," Thornton said as they prepared to leave. "Word travels fast in Coloma. Blackwell will know by nightfall that you've enlisted my help." "Then we'd best be prepared for his reaction," Cooper said grimly. As they stepped out into the bright midday sun, Zara felt both empowered by their preparations and unnerved by the undercurrent of danger. Cooper seemed to sense her conflicting emotions. "Let's get some lunch," he suggested. "There's a small cafe by the river that serves decent food, and we can discuss our next steps." The cafe was a simple establishment with tables overlooking the American River, where miners could be seen panning for gold along the banks. After they ordered, Zara found herself watching these men, some young, some old, all driven by the same dream of striking it rich. "Do any of them actually find enough gold to make it worthwhile?" she asked. Cooper followed her gaze. "Some do, most don't. The real money is in operations like the Sunrise Mine, where they're not just panning but excavating larger deposits." "How successful is the Sunrise Mine?" Zara inquired, turning her attention back to Cooper. A shadow crossed his face. "Very. It's one of the richest claims in the area, which is why Blackwell wouldn't take kindly to sharing 40% of its profits." "You seem to know a lot about Blackwell's operation," Zara observed. "You mentioned having dealings with him before. What happened between you two?" Cooper was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the river. Just as Zara thought he might not answer, he spoke, his voice low and controlled. 2 years ago, my younger brother came out west to join me. He was just 20, full of dreams about finding gold and making his fortune." Cooper's jaw tightened. "He took a job at the Sunrise Mine while I was away guiding an expedition. When I returned 3 months later, he was dead. Mining accident, they said." "Oh, Cooper," Zara breathed, instinctively reaching across the table to touch his hand. "I'm so sorry." The official story was that he was careless, went into an unstable section of the mine despite warnings. Cooper's eyes met hers, hard with suppressed anger. "But I knew my brother. He was careful, methodical. And there were whispers from other miners that he discovered Blackwell was skimming gold, reporting less than what was actually being extracted to cheat his investors." "You think Blackwell had him killed?" Zara stated quietly. Cooper nodded once. "I couldn't prove it. No one would talk openly, and the local law enforcement is firmly in Blackwell's pocket. So I've been watching, waiting for a chance to expose him for what he is. Zara absorbed this information, understanding now why Cooper had been so quick to offer his help. "This isn't just about my claim for you, is it? It's about justice for your brother." "Does that change things?" Cooper asked, a hint of defensiveness in his tone. "No," Zara said firmly, her hand still resting on his. "If anything, it makes me more certain that we're doing the right thing." Their food arrived, momentarily interrupting the conversation. As they ate, Zara considered the new dimension this revelation added to their alliance. Cooper wasn't simply being chivalrous in helping her. He had his own reasons for wanting to see Blackwell held accountable. "What was your brother's name?" Zara asked softly. A ghost of a smile touched Cooper's lips. "Caleb. He was always the smarter one, had a way with numbers like your friend Thornton." "Tell me about him," Zara encouraged, sensing that Cooper rarely spoke of his brother and understanding the importance of keeping Caleb's memory alive. As they finished their meal, Cooper shared stories of growing up with Caleb in Missouri, their parents' early deaths, and how he had raised his younger brother from the age of 12. Zara, in turn, told Cooper about her own family, her strict but loving father, her mother who had died when Zara was 16, and her lonely life as the only child of a wealthy Boston merchant. "It's strange," Zara mused as they walked back toward the center of town. 2 days ago, we were strangers. Now you know more about me than most people in Boston." Cooper glanced down at her, his expression softening. "Sometimes the trail has a way of accelerating friendships. When you rely on someone to survive, it creates a different kind of bond." "Is that what we have? A bond?" Zara asked, feeling suddenly bold. Cooper seemed caught off guard by the directness of her question. For a moment he just looked at her, something unreadable in his blue eyes. "I think we might," he admitted finally. The simple acknowledgement sent a warm current through Zara's chest. Before she could respond, however, they were interrupted by a shout from across the street. "Walsh! Miss Palmer!" They turned to see Samuel Thornton hurrying toward them, his expression urgent. "I've just heard troubling news," he said when he reached them, slightly out of breath. "Blackwell has filed a claim with the sheriff, accusing you, Miss Palmer, of attempting to defraud him with forged documents." "What?" Zara exclaimed, indignation flaring. "That's absurd." "It's a delaying tactic," Cooper said grimly. "He's trying to prevent the book inspection tomorrow." Thornton nodded. "Sheriff Miller is looking for you now. I thought it best to warn you before he finds you." "I have nothing to hide," Zara insisted. "My documents are completely legitimate." "The sheriff won't determine that," Cooper explained. "He'll just hold the documents and possibly you until a judge can review the case. The circuit judge won't be in Coloma for another 2 weeks." Zara's heart sank as she understood the implications. By then, Blackwell could alter or destroy any incriminating financial records. "Exactly," Cooper confirmed. "We need to move quickly." They thanked Thornton for the warning and hastily made their way to the boarding house, avoiding the main streets where the sheriff might be looking for them. In Zara's room, Cooper outlined a new plan. "We can't wait for the official book inspection now," he said, pacing the small space. "We need to see those records tonight before Blackwell has a chance to sanitize them." "You're suggesting we break into his office?" Zara asked, equal parts scandalized and intrigued. "Not his office," Cooper corrected. "The mine itself. That's where they keep the real ledgers, the ones that show the actual gold output, not the doctored figures they report to investors." Zara considered this for a moment. Even if we get those records, would they be legally admissible? "We would have obtained them illegally." "At this point, it's not just about legal proceedings," Cooper said, his expression grim. "It's about getting leverage. If we have evidence of Blackwell's fraud, We can use it to negotiate. Either he acknowledges your rightful claim, or we make the evidence public, destroying his reputation and potentially leading to criminal charges. The plan was risky, bordering on reckless, but Zara found herself nodding in agreement. After Blackwell's underhanded move, playing by the rules no longer seemed like a viable option. "When do we go?" she asked. "Tonight," Cooper replied. "The night shift at the mine ends at midnight. There's a brief period before the morning shift arrives when the administrative office should be empty." They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. Cooper left briefly to secure horses and supplies, while Zara changed into more practical attire, a simple skirt and blouse that would allow for easier movement. She also penned a letter outlining her situation and the evidence they hoped to find, addressed to her father's lawyer in Boston. If something went wrong, at least there would be a record of what they had attempted to do. As dusk fell, Cooper returned to the boarding house. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly from the doorway of her room. Zara nodded, tucking her father's pocket watch into her skirt pocket for luck. "As ready as I'll ever be." They slipped out the back of the boarding house and made their way to where Cooper had left the horses, two sturdy mounts that looked capable of covering rough terrain quickly. The night was clear and moonlit, which would make their journey easier but also make them more visible if anyone was watching. "The Sunrise Mine is about 5 miles east of town," Cooper explained as they rode out of Coloma, keeping to less traveled paths. "It's built into the side of a hill, with an administrative building near the entrance." As they rode, Zara found herself studying Cooper's profile in the moonlight, the strong line of his jaw, the determined set of his mouth, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings for potential threats. Despite the danger they were facing, she felt safe in his company, confident in his abilities and his integrity. The mine came into view after about an hour's ride, a dark opening in the hillside, surrounded by wooden structures and equipment. Lanterns burned at the entrance, where a few men could be seen loading carts or maintaining tools. Cooper guided them to a stand of trees several hundred yards from the mine. "We'll wait here until the shift changes," he whispered, helping Zara dismount. "The administrative building is that small cabin to the right of the main entrance." They tethered the horses and settled in to wait, hidden among the trees with a clear view of the mine operations. As midnight approached, activity at the mine increased as the night shift prepared to depart. "See that man by the entrance," Cooper whispered, pointing to a burly figure supervising the workers. "That's Silas Morgan, Blackwell's foreman. He's the one who reported my brother's accident. If anyone knows the truth about what happened to Caleb, it's him." There was an edge to Cooper's voice that made Zara glance at him with concern. "Cooper," she said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "We're here for the ledgers, remember, to prove Blackwell's fraud and secure my claim." Cooper didn't respond immediately, his eyes still fixed on Morgan. Finally, he nodded. "You're right. The ledgers are what matter." By 12:30, the night shift had departed and the area around the mine had quieted. Only 2 guards remained, one patrolling near the main entrance and another stationed by what appeared to be a storage building. "Now's our chance," Cooper murmured. "Follow me, stay low, and move quickly when I signal." They crept from the tree line, using the shadows cast by equipment and buildings to avoid detection. Cooper led them in a wide arc around the patrolling guard, timing their movements to coincide with his circuit away from the administrative building. When they reached the small cabin, Cooper tested the door locked, as expected. He produced a set of slim tools from his pocket and set to work on the lock while Zara kept watch, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain it would alert the guards. After what seemed an eternity but was probably less than a minute, there was a soft click, and Cooper eased the door open. They slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind them. The interior was dark except for moonlight filtering through a small window. Cooper produced a small lantern from his pack and lit it, keeping the flame low. The administrative building was a simple two-room structure, an outer office with a desk and filing cabinets, and an inner office that presumably belonged to Blackwell or his foreman. "Check the desk," Cooper instructed in a hushed voice. "I'll look through the filing cabinet." Zara moved to the desk, carefully opening drawers and examining their contents. Most contained mundane items, writing implements, blank forms, mining maps. But in the bottom drawer, she found a ledger bound in red leather. "Cooper," she whispered excitedly, "I think I've found something." He joined her at the desk as she opened the ledger. Inside were detailed records of daily gold extraction, with dates, weights, and values. The amounts were substantially higher than what had been reported in the quarterly statements sent to her father. "This is it," Cooper confirmed, his voice tight with suppressed excitement. "This proves Blackwell has been underreporting the mine's output." Zara quickly compared figures between the ledger and copies of the reports she had brought with her. "He's reporting less than half the actual yield," she said, indignation rising as she calculated the scale of the deception. "My father's share alone would be worth thousands more than what Blackwell claimed." Cooper was about to respond when a noise outside froze them both, the sound of approaching footsteps and voices. They quickly extinguished the lantern and pressed themselves against the wall beside the window. Through the glass, Zara could make out two figures approaching Silas Morgan and another man she didn't recognize. "Blackwell's worried about the Palmer woman," Morgan was saying. "Says she's got documents that could cause trouble." "What kind of trouble?" the other man asked. "The kind that ends with Blackwell in prison," Morgan replied with a harsh laugh. "But he's taking care of it. Sheriff's looking for her now, and if that doesn't work—" He made a gesture that needed no interpretation. Cooper's hand found Zara's in the darkness, squeezing it reassuringly. The footsteps continued past the administrative building toward the mine entrance. Once they were out of earshot, Cooper released her hand. "We need to go," he whispered, "and we need to take that ledger with us." Zara nodded, tucking the red leather book into her skirt pocket alongside her father's watch. They moved back to the door, Cooper cracking it open slightly to check if the coast was clear. "Wait," he murmured, closing the door again. "The guard is coming this way." They retreated to the inner office, closing that door as well and positioning themselves behind it. Outside, they heard the main door open, followed by heavy footsteps. "Morgan," a voice called. "You in here." The footsteps moved around the outer office, then approached the inner door. Zara held her breath, her heart hammering against her ribs. Cooper tensed beside her, his hand moving to the pistol at his hip. The doorknob turned and the door began to swing open. In one swift motion, Cooper stepped forward, striking the guard with the butt of his pistol as he entered. The man crumpled to the floor with a muffled groan. "He'll be out for a while, but we need to move fast," Cooper said, holstering his weapon. They hurried from the building, no longer able to be as cautious as they'd been on their approach. They had made it halfway to the tree line when a shout rang out behind them. "Hey, stop right there. Run," Cooper urged, pushing Zara ahead of him as a gunshot cracked through the night air. They sprinted for the trees, bullets kicking up dirt around them. Reaching the horses, Cooper boosted Zara into her saddle before mounting his own steed. They took off at a gallop, riding hard away from the mine. More shouts and gunfire pursued them, but soon they were deep in the forest, the sounds fading behind them. Cooper led them on a winding path through the trees, clearly trying to throw off any potential pursuers. Only when they had ridden for nearly an hour, crossing streams and doubling back several times, did Cooper finally slow their pace. "I think we've lost them," he said, drawing his horse alongside Zara's. "Are you all right?" Zara nodded, still breathless from the chase. "Yes, I'm fine, and I still have the ledger." She patted her pocket to confirm. Cooper's expression was grim. "We can't go back to Coloma tonight. Blackwell will have men watching for us. We need to find somewhere safe to lay low until morning." "Where can we go?" Zara asked, suddenly aware of how vulnerable they were, fugitives in the wilderness with powerful enemies searching for them. Cooper seemed to consider for a moment. "There's an abandoned trapper's cabin about 2 miles from here. I've used it before when guiding in this area. It's not comfortable, but it's secure and hidden." They rode in tense silence, both alert for sounds of pursuit. The forest was quiet around them, punctuated only by the occasional hoot of an owl or rustle of nocturnal creatures. The moon provided enough light to navigate, and Cooper seemed confident in his direction, despite the lack of visible trail. Eventually, they came to a small clearing where a crude log cabin stood, partially obscured by overhanging trees. It was indeed abandoned, with cobwebs decorating the single window and door. "It's not the Palmer House Hotel," Cooper said with a wry smile as he helped Zara dismount, "but it will keep us safe for the night." Inside, the cabin was spare but serviceable: a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with a single chair, and a narrow cot pushed against one wall. Cooper quickly set about building a small fire while Zara examined their prize by the growing light. "The evidence is clear," she said, turning pages of the ledger. "Blackwell has been systematically underreporting the mine's output since at least 1847. The actual yield is more than double what he's been reporting to investors." Cooper joined her at the table, his expression hardening as he looked over the figures. "And here," he said, pointing to entries from the summer of 1847, "these dates coincide with when Caleb was working at the mine." If he saw these numbers and compared them to the official reports, he would have known Blackwell was committing fraud, Zara finished softly. "I'm so sorry, Cooper." Cooper closed the ledger, his jaw tight. "At least now we have proof." "But proof is only useful if we can get it to the right people." "Who can we trust in Coloma?" Zara asked. "Not the sheriff, that's certain," Cooper replied grimly. "But there's a federal marshal who passes through town every few weeks, man named Fletcher. He's honest, and he answers to authorities beyond Blackwell's reach." "Do you know when he'll next be in Coloma?" Cooper shook his head. "His schedule varies, but Samuel Thornton might know. They've worked together before on legal matters." They fell into silence, the magnitude of their situation settling over them. They were effectively outlaws now, having broken into the mine and stolen Blackwell's private ledger. Even with the evidence of fraud, they were vulnerable. "You should get some rest," Cooper said finally, gesturing to the cot. "I'll keep watch." "Cooper," Zara said, hesitation in her voice, "thank you for everything. I know this has put you in danger and you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," he interrupted gently. "Not just for Caleb, though that's part of it, but also because—" He trailed off, seeming to struggle with what he wanted to say. "Because," Zara prompted, her heart suddenly beating faster for reasons that had nothing to do with their earlier escape. Cooper met her eyes, the firelight casting warm shadows across his features. "Because from the moment I saw you at that ravine, something told me you were worth risking everything for." The simple honesty of his words took Zara's breath away. Without thinking, she stepped closer to him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I feel the same," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "When you offered me your hand that day, it wasn't just my life you saved." Cooper's expression softened, and his hand rose to gently touch her cheek. "Zara," he murmured, the sound of her name on his lips sending a shiver down her spine. The space between them seemed charged with electricity, drawing them inexorably closer. When his lips finally met hers, the contact was gentle but filled with a yearning that had been building since their first meeting. Zara's hands moved to his chest, feeling his heartbeat quicken beneath her touch. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, more revealing of the feelings that had been growing between them. When they finally parted, both were breathless, their foreheads resting against each other as they processed this new development in their alliance. "I didn't plan for this," Cooper admitted with a soft laugh. "Falling for a Boston heiress while breaking into a gold mine wasn't exactly how I imagined my week going." Zara smiled, her hand moving to cup his cheek. "Life rarely follows our plans." "If it did, I'd still be in Boston, probably engaged to some insufferable banker my father approved of." "Then I'm grateful for wayward plans," Cooper said, pressing another gentle kiss to her lips. The tenderness of the moment was interrupted by a sound outside the distant but unmistakable whinny of horses. Cooper instantly tensed, moving away from Zara to peer through the cabin's single window. "Riders," he said quietly, his hand moving to his pistol. "At least 3, maybe more." "Blackwell's men?" Zara asked, fear creeping back into her voice. "Most likely, they must have followed our trail." Cooper quickly extinguished the fire, plunging the cabin into darkness. "We need to move. Now." They gathered their few belongings, Cooper taking the precious ledger and securing it inside his jacket. They slipped out the back of the cabin into the forest beyond, leading their horses quietly until they were a safe distance away before mounting. "We need to reach Coloma before Blackwell realizes we have the ledger," Cooper said as they rode. "If we can get to Thornton, he can help us find Marshal Fletcher or at least get word to him." The night was waning, the eastern sky beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. They rode hard through the forest, Cooper setting a pace that pushed both horses and riders to their limits. Behind them, they occasionally heard distant shouts their pursuers had found the cabin and realized their quarry had escaped. As the sun broke over the horizon, Coloma came into view in the valley below. But instead of the relief Zara expected to feel, a new anxiety gripped her. The town was no longer a safe haven. Blackwell's influence extended throughout Coloma, and the sheriff was actively looking for them. "We can't just ride into town," she pointed out. "We'll be arrested on sight." Cooper nodded, reining his horse to a stop on the ridge overlooking Coloma. "We need another approach." He thought for a moment, then pointed to a small house on the outskirts of town. "That's Thornton's place. If we circle around and approach from the back, we might reach him without being seen." They descended from the ridge, keeping to the tree line and avoiding open areas where they might be spotted. When they reached Thornton's modest home, Cooper led them to the back door, knocking softly. After a tense moment, the door cracked open to reveal Thornton's surprised face. "Walsh, Miss Palmer, thank God you're alive. Quick, come inside." Once inside, Cooper quickly explained what had happened at the mine and showed Thornton the ledger. The accountant examined it with growing amazement. "This is damning evidence," he confirmed. "With these figures, there's no question Blackwell has been defrauding his investors for years." "Is Marshal Fletcher in town?" Cooper asked urgently. Thornton shook his head. "Not currently, but I can get word to him. He's due in Placerville the day after tomorrow." "That might be too late," Zara said, worry creasing her brow. "Blackwell knows we have the ledger by now. He'll be desperate." "There's another option," Thornton said hesitantly. "Judge Wilson arrived in town last night earlier than expected for the circuit court. He's staying at the Coloma Hotel." Cooper and Zara exchanged a hopeful glance. "If we could get to the judge with this evidence—" Cooper began. "It would have to be done carefully," Thornton cautioned. Blackwell has friends everywhere, and the sheriff is still looking for you both. After discussion, they formulated a plan. Thornton would approach Judge Wilson, explain the situation, and arrange for him to meet them privately. Meanwhile, Cooper and Zara would remain hidden at Thornton's home. "I should go now," Thornton said, reaching for his coat. "The judge typically has breakfast at 8, and it's nearly that now." After Thornton departed, Cooper and Zara were left alone in the small house, tension and exhaustion catching up with them after their night of danger and revelations. "You should rest while you can," Cooper suggested, noticing the weariness in Zara's posture. "We don't know what the day will bring." Zara wanted to protest, but found she could barely keep her eyes open. "Wake me when Thornton returns," she said, settling onto a small sofa in Thornton's parlor. Cooper nodded, moving to stand by the window where he could keep watch on the street outside. As Zara drifted toward sleep, her last sight was Cooper's vigilant silhouette against the morning light, and her last thought was of the kiss they had shared in the cabin, a moment of connection and promise in the midst of danger. She awakened to Cooper, gently shaking her shoulder. "Zara," he said urgently, "Thornton's back and we have a problem." Fully alert instantly, Zara sat up to see Thornton standing in the doorway, his expression grim. "What happened?" she asked. "Judge Wilson is willing to hear your case," Thornton explained, "but there's a complication. Blackwell is at the hotel with him now, filing formal charges against both of you: trespassing, theft, even attempted murder for the guard Cooper knocked unconscious." "That's absurd," Zara protested. "The guard was barely hurt." "Blackwell claims otherwise," Thornton said. "And without any way to refute his claims immediately, the judge has no choice but to issue warrants for your arrest." Cooper's expression hardened. "So, we're back where we started, running and hiding while Blackwell controls the narrative." "Not necessarily," Thornton replied, a hint of hope in his voice. "The judge seemed skeptical of Blackwell's claims. He agreed to meet with you privately before officially issuing the warrants, but it would have to be secret tonight after Blackwell has left town." "Where?" Cooper asked. "The judge suggested the church," Thornton answered. "It's neutral ground and the pastor is away visiting a sick parishioner in Sacramento. Judge Wilson will be there at 9 tonight. No one else will know." It was a risky plan, but their options were limited. They spent the day at Thornton's house, reviewing the evidence in the ledger and preparing what they would say to the judge. Thornton left briefly to bring them food and to confirm the meeting was still set for that evening. As dusk fell, they prepared to leave for the church. Cooper checked and rechecked his pistol, clearly anticipating trouble. "You think Blackwell suspects the meeting?" Zara asked, watching his preparations with concern. "I think Blackwell is desperate," Cooper replied. "And desperate men are unpredictable. We need to be ready for anything." They left Thornton's house under cover of darkness, taking a circuitous route to avoid the more populated areas of town. The church stood on a small hill at the edge of Coloma, its white steeple visible in the moonlight. As they approached, Cooper suddenly halted, pulling Zara into the shadow of a large oak tree. "Something's not right," he whispered, his eyes scanning the area around the church. "There's no light inside, and the judge should be there by now." Zara peered through the darkness, trying to see what had alarmed Cooper. Then she spotted the silhouette of a man standing beside the church, the moonlight briefly glinting off what could only be a rifle barrel. "It's a trap," Cooper murmured, his arm protectively circling Zara's waist. "Blackwell must have intercepted Thornton or forced the judge to reveal our plan." "What do we do now?" Zara asked, fear and frustration mingling in her voice. Cooper was silent for a moment, clearly weighing their options. "We need to leave Coloma," he finally said. "Tonight. Ride to Placerville and find Marshal Fletcher ourselves." But what about Thornton? If Blackwell knows he helped us, Samuel can take care of himself, Cooper assured her, though concern was evident in his tone. And Blackwell is too smart to harm a respected citizen openly. But we need to move quickly. They retreated from the church, keeping to the shadows as they made their way back toward Thornton's house to collect their horses. They were nearly there when the sound of approaching footsteps caused them to duck into an alleyway between two buildings. A group of men passed by on the main street, led by Sheriff Miller and Silas Morgan. Their conversation drifted clearly to where Cooper and Zara hid. "Blackwell wants them found tonight," Morgan was saying. "The woman especially. She has documents that could ruin everything." "My men are watching all the roads out of town," the sheriff replied. "And we've got eyes on Thornton's place. If they show their faces, we'll have them." After the men passed, Cooper turned to Zara, his expression grave. "They're watching Thornton's house. We can't go back for the horses." "Then how do we get to Placerville?" Zara asked, desperation edging into her voice. Cooper thought for a moment, then his face brightened with an idea. "The stage depot. There's an overnight stage to Placerville that leaves at 10 if we can sneak aboard." It was a desperate plan, but it was all they had. They made their way cautiously to the stage depot on the eastern edge of town. The Sacramento-bound stage was being loaded with mail bags and luggage, passengers milling about as they prepared for the overnight journey. "Wait here," Cooper instructed, positioning Zara behind a stack of crates. "I'm going to see if I can secure passage." Zara watched nervously as Cooper approached the stage driver, speaking with him in hushed tones and passing what looked like several gold coins. After a brief conversation, Cooper returned to Zara. "It's arranged," he said. "The driver will let us board last after the other passengers. He'll claim we had prepaid tickets." "You bribed him," Zara observed. "Generously compensated him for his flexibility," Cooper corrected with a hint of a smile. $50 goes a long way with a stage driver." They waited tensely as passengers boarded the stage. Just as the final call was being made, Cooper led Zara quickly from their hiding place to the stage. The driver nodded discreetly and helped them aboard without announcing their names. The stage was crowded, with 6 passengers already seated: a well-dressed couple who appeared to be merchants, an elderly minister, a young man who looked to be a clerk, and 2 rough-looking miners. Zara and Cooper squeezed into the remaining space, keeping their faces turned away from the other passengers as much as possible. With a crack of the whip and a lurch, the stage began its journey to Placerville. As they passed through the outskirts of Coloma, Zara tensed at the sight of armed men stopping and checking wagons and riders leaving town. But the stage was allowed through with only a cursory glance, the sheriff's deputy apparently not expecting them to have secured passage on the public coach. Once they were beyond the town limits, Cooper relaxed slightly, his shoulder pressed against Zara's in the cramped confines of the stage. Despite the uncomfortable seating and the constant jostling as the stage navigated the rough road, Zara felt a sense of relief. They had escaped Coloma, at least for now. The journey to Placerville would take most of the night, with one stop at a way station to change horses. As the hours passed, most of the passengers dozed off, lulled by the rhythmic motion of the stage. Zara found her own eyelids growing heavy, her head eventually coming to rest on Cooper's shoulder. "Sleep," he murmured quietly, his arm slipping around her waist. "I'll keep watch." Secure in his protection, Zara allowed herself to drift into an uneasy slumber, the precious ledger tucked safely inside Cooper's jacket and her father's pocket watch a comforting weight against her side. She awakened briefly when the stage stopped at the way station. Through bleary eyes, she watched as fresh horses were harnessed and the driver took a short break. Cooper remained vigilant, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings for signs of pursuit. The journey resumed, and Zara must have fallen asleep again, for the next thing she knew, gray dawn light was filtering through the stage windows, and the driver was announcing their approach to Placerville. Formerly known as Hangtown due to the frequent justice meted out to thieves and murderers in its early days, Placerville had evolved into a substantial settlement, larger and more developed than Coloma. As the stage pulled into the town center, Zara could see multi-story buildings, proper streets, and even a small courthouse. "What now?" she asked Cooper quietly as they disembarked, grateful to stretch her legs after the cramped overnight journey. "First, breakfast," Cooper decided, guiding her toward a small cafe. "Then we find out when Marshal Fletcher is expected to arrive." Over a simple meal of eggs and biscuits, they discussed their next steps. Cooper would inquire about the marshal at the Placerville Sheriff's Office, which he believed to be free from Blackwell's influence. Meanwhile, Zara would secure rooms at a nearby hotel's separate rooms to maintain propriety despite their growing closeness. "We should use different names," Cooper advised. "Blackwell might send telegrams to alert authorities here." Zara nodded in agreement. "I'll register as Mrs. Sarah Davis," she decided, using her mother's maiden name. "And you, James Cooper," he replied with a slight smile. "My middle name." Simple enough to remember if someone calls it out. They parted ways outside the cafe, agreeing to meet back at the hotel in 2 hours. As Zara arranged for their rooms, she couldn't help but feel exposed and vulnerable without Cooper beside her. The events of the past days had forged a bond between them that went beyond their shared purpose, or even their growing romantic feelings. They had become partners in a very real sense, each instinctively relying on the other's strengths. The hotel was modest but clean, catering primarily to travelers and businessmen passing through Placerville. Zara secured adjoining rooms on the second floor, with windows overlooking the main street, a strategic choice that would allow them to observe any unusual activity in the town. After freshening up as best she could with the limited toiletries provided, Zara sat by the window to wait for Cooper's return. The street below bustled with activity, so different from the refined neighborhoods of Boston, yet vibrant in its own frontier way. A knock at her door startled her from her observations. "Who is it?" she called, suddenly wary. "It's me," came Cooper's familiar voice. Relief flooded through her as she opened the door. Cooper entered quickly, removing his hat as he stepped into the room. His expression was both excited and concerned. "I have news," he said without preamble. "Fletcher is here in Placerville, arrived yesterday, but there's a complication. Blackwell sent telegrams ahead, accusing us of theft and fraud. The local sheriff has been asked to detain us if we're spotted." Zara's heart sank. "So we're still fugitives, even here." "For now," Cooper agreed. "But I managed to get word to Fletcher through a deputy who knows me from previous dealings. Fletcher has agreed to meet us privately this afternoon at the livery stable on the edge of town." Hope rekindled in Zara's chest. "That's good news, if we can show him the ledger and explain everything." "Exactly," Cooper said, his own excitement evident. "Fletcher is a fair man. If the evidence is strong enough, and it is, he'll listen, regardless of Blackwell's accusations." They spent the next few hours reviewing the ledger once more, ensuring they understood all the details of Blackwell's fraud so they could present a clear case to the marshal. As the appointed meeting time approached, they left the hotel cautiously, taking a roundabout route to the livery stable to avoid being spotted by anyone who might recognize them. The stable was quiet when they arrived, most of the horses out with their owners at this time of day. A lone figure waited inside, a tall man with graying hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore a simple suit rather than a uniform, but the badge pinned to his vest identified him as Federal Marshal James Fletcher. "Walsh," the marshal greeted Cooper with a nod. His sharp eyes moved to Zara. "And you must be Miss Palmer. I've heard quite a bit about you in the last day, most of it from Daniel Blackwell, and none of it flattering." "I imagine not," Zara replied, lifting her chin. "But I can assure you, Marshal, there's more to this story than what Blackwell has told you." Fletcher gestured to some bales of hay arranged in a rough circle. "Why don't we sit, and you can tell me your side of things?" Over the next hour, Zara and Cooper took turns explaining the situation: her father's partnership with Blackwell, the fraudulent reporting of the mine's output, Cooper's suspicions about his brother's death, and their discovery of the incriminating ledger. Fletcher listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but offering no indication of his thoughts. When they finished, Cooper handed over the red leather ledger. "This contains the true production figures from the Sunrise Mine. Compare them to the official reports Blackwell filed, and you'll see the scale of the fraud." Fletcher examined the ledger carefully, flipping through pages and pausing to study specific entries. Finally, he closed the book and looked up at them, his expression serious. "This is compelling evidence," he admitted. "But acquiring it the way you did complicates matters. Breaking into private property, taking documents without authorization, these are serious offenses, regardless of your intentions." "We tried the legal route first," Zara argued. "Blackwell blocked our access to the official books, then filed false accusations to prevent us from presenting our case to Judge Wilson." Fletcher nodded thoughtfully. "I believe you, but the law can be frustratingly inflexible sometimes." He stood, tucking the ledger under his arm. "I need to review this more thoroughly, compare it with the official reports. If everything checks out, I'll have grounds to launch a formal investigation into Blackwell's operations." "And what about us?" Cooper asked, rising to face the marshal. "Are you going to arrest us?" Fletcher considered the question. "Not at this time," he said finally. "I'm placing you both under what we might call protective custody. You'll remain here in Placerville at your hotel until I complete my initial investigation. You're not to leave town under any circumstances. Is that clear?" Relief washed over Zara. It wasn't freedom exactly, but it was far better than being thrown in jail or returned to Coloma to face Blackwell's accusations. "Perfectly clear," she agreed. "Thank you, Marshal." Fletcher escorted them back to their hotel, his presence effectively announcing to anyone watching that they were under his authority, now protected from arrest by local officials, but also bound to remain in Placerville until the matter was resolved. Over the next 2 days, Zara and Cooper maintained a low profile, taking meals in their rooms and venturing out only briefly for necessary items. Despite the restrictions, there was a new sense of hope in their situation. With Fletcher examining the evidence, they had a real chance at justice. They also had quiet moments alone together, where the connection that had begun at the Ravine and deepened during their flight from Coloma could grow and strengthen. They talked for hours about their lives, their dreams, the futures they had imagined for themselves before fate had thrown them together. On the evening of the second day, Cooper knocked on the door connecting their rooms. When Zara opened it, she found him dressed more formally than usual, his hair neatly combed, his expression both nervous and determined. "I thought we might have dinner downstairs in the hotel restaurant tonight," he suggested. "Marshal Fletcher didn't explicitly forbid it, and I'd like to spend an evening with you that doesn't involve running from danger or discussing fraud." Zara smiled, touched by the simple gesture. "I'd like that very much." She wore her best remaining dress, a deep blue ensemble that had survived the Ravine accident relatively unscathed. It wasn't the latest Boston fashion, but when Cooper's eyes lit up at the sight of her, she felt as beautiful as if she were wearing the finest Parisian gown. The hotel restaurant was modestly elegant, with tablecloths and candles creating an atmosphere of civilized dining unusual for a frontier town. They were seated at a corner table, relatively private, but still within view of other diners. "This almost feels normal," Zara commented as they studied the menu. "As if we were just a couple enjoying an evening out, rather than witnesses in a federal investigation." Cooper chuckled, the sound warming her heart. "I suppose we all crave normalcy, even in extraordinary circumstances." Their meal was simple but delicious: roast beef, vegetables from local farms, and a bottle of California wine that Cooper insisted on ordering despite the expense. "To new beginnings," he proposed as they raised their glasses. "New beginnings," Zara echoed, the words carrying more weight than a simple toast. As they ate, their conversation flowed easily, touching on lighter topics than had dominated their interactions thus far. Cooper told amusing stories of his guiding expeditions, while Zara shared anecdotes of Boston society that often left him shaking his head in bemusement at the rigid customs of Eastern elite. "Would you go back?" Cooper asked suddenly, the question hanging between them. "To Boston, I mean. If this is resolved in your favor, if you secure your father's share of the mine." Zara considered the question, aware of its deeper implications. "I don't know," she answered honestly. 3 weeks ago I would have said yes without hesitation. Boston is all I've known, but now. Cooper prompted, his blue eyes intent on hers. "Now I'm not so certain," Zara admitted. "There's something about the West, its openness, its possibilities. In Boston, my path was largely predetermined. Here it feels like I could become anyone, do anything." Cooper smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his usually serious features. "I've felt that way since I first crossed the Mississippi. The West has its dangers, its hardships, but also a freedom I've never found anywhere else." Their conversation paused as the waiter brought dessert apple pie with fresh cream. As they enjoyed the sweet finale to their meal, Zara found herself studying Cooper's face, memorizing each detail: the slight crinkles at the corners of his eyes when he smiled, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair curled slightly at his collar. "What is it?" he asked, noticing her scrutiny. "I'm just grateful," Zara said softly, "that my wagon rolled into that ravine, that you happened to be passing by, that you offered me your hand." Cooper reached across the table, his fingers intertwining with hers. "The best decision I ever made," he said, his voice husky with emotion. The moment was interrupted by a commotion at the restaurant entrance. They looked up to see Marshall Fletcher striding toward their table, his expression urgent. "I need you both to come with me," he said without preamble. "Now." Abandoning their dessert, they followed Fletcher from the restaurant and up to Zara's room. Once the door was closed, the marshal turned to them with grave news. "Blackwell is on his way to Placerville," he announced. "He'll arrive by morning." "Has he been arrested?" Cooper asked hopefully. Fletcher shook his head. "Not yet. I've verified the ledger against official reports, and there's no question he's been defrauding investors. But I need more witness testimony, specifically from someone who worked at the mine and can confirm the actual gold output." "That won't be easy to find," Cooper pointed out. "Blackwell's men are loyal to him, whether through fear or payment." "Perhaps not all of them," Fletcher said, a hint of optimism in his tone. "I received a telegram today from Coloma. Silas Morgan, Blackwell's foreman, has expressed interest in talking to me." Cooper's expression hardened at the mention of Morgan. The same Silas Morgan who reported my brother's accident. He can't be trusted. Maybe not, Fletcher conceded. But he claims to have information about both the fraud and your brother's death. Says he's tired of carrying Blackwell's secrets. Zara placed a gentle hand on Cooper's arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. If there's even a chance he's telling the truth, we have to listen, she said softly. Cooper struggled visibly with the idea, his desire for justice for his brother warring with his distrust of Morgan. Finally, he gave a curt nod. When is Morgan arriving? That's the thing, Fletcher said, his expression troubled. He's not. He refuses to leave Coloma, says it would alert Blackwell. He wants us to meet him there at the church tomorrow night. It could be another trap, Cooper warned. I'm aware of that possibility, Fletcher acknowledged, but it's also our best chance to build an airtight case against Blackwell. With Morgan's testimony and the ledger, we could bring charges of fraud, tax evasion, and possibly even murder. The decision before them was clear but difficult. Returning to Coloma meant facing Blackwell on his home territory, risking another ambush, potentially walking into a trap. Staying in Placerville was safer but might mean losing their only chance to fully expose Blackwell's crimes. I'm going, Cooper declared, his jaw set with determination. For Caleb, if nothing else. I need to know the truth about what happened to my brother. Then I'm coming with you, Zara said firmly, meeting his surprised gaze. We started this together, we'll finish it together. Fletcher seemed to have anticipated their decision. I'll arrange for horses and escort you myself, he said. We'll leave at first light, travel through back trails to avoid being seen. If all goes well, we'll reach Coloma by nightfall, meet Morgan at the church, and have him safely out of town before Blackwell knows what's happening. The plan was set. After Fletcher departed to make the necessary arrangements, Zara and Cooper were left alone with the weight of tomorrow's risks hanging over them. You don't have to come, Cooper said, taking her hands in his. You could stay here where it's safer. I'd understand. Zara shook her head resolutely. No, my father's legacy is at stake too, and besides. She hesitated, then continued with simple honesty. I couldn't bear to let you face this alone. Cooper's expression softened, and he drew her into his arms, holding her close as if trying to shield her from the dangers that lay ahead. Zara Palmer, he murmured against her hair, you are the most courageous woman I've ever known. She looked up at him, her heart full of emotions too complex for words. Instead of speaking, she rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his, pouring all her feelings into the kiss-fear for tomorrow, hope for justice, and the deep, undeniable love that had grown between them. When they finally parted, Cooper's eyes were dark with emotion. When this is over, he said, his voice a low promise, we'll talk about those new beginnings. Yes, Zara agreed, her heart quickening at the future those words implied. When this is over. Dawn broke cold and misty over Placerville as Zara, Cooper, and Marshal Fletcher set out on the journey back to Coloma. They rode in silence, each absorbed in their own thoughts about what awaited them. Fletcher had chosen a route that avoided the main roads, taking them through forest trails and across streams where their tracks would be difficult to follow. By midday, they paused in a clearing to rest the horses and eat a simple meal of jerky and biscuits. As they prepared to continue, Fletcher pulled a revolver from his saddlebag and offered it to Zara. You know how to use one of these, Miss Palmer? He asked. Zara hesitated. Growing up in Boston, firearms had never been part of her education. No, she admitted. Fletcher nodded, unsurprised. Then keep close to Walsh and me. If trouble starts, find cover immediately. The remainder of the journey passed without incident, though tension mounted as they drew closer to Coloma. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Fletcher led them to a small clearing about a mile outside town. "We'll wait here until dark," he decided. "Less chance of being recognized that way." The hours crawled by, each lost in their own thoughts. Cooper cleaned his pistol methodically, his face set in grim lines. Fletcher made notes in a small book, presumably organizing the evidence against Blackwell. Zara found herself touching her father's pocket watch repeatedly, drawing comfort from the familiar weight and the memory of the man who had taught her the value of perseverance. As night fell, Fletcher outlined their plan one final time. "We'll approach the church from different directions. I'll go first to ensure it's not an ambush. If it's clear, I'll signal with a single lantern flash from the church door. Walsh, you and Miss Palmer will follow. If Morgan is there and willing to talk, we'll record his statement, then escort him back to Placerville for protection." "And if it is a trap?" Cooper asked, voicing the concern they all shared. Fletcher's expression was grave. "Then we retreat immediately and regroup. No heroics, understood? Blackwell isn't worth dying for." They made their way to Coloma under cover of darkness, leaving their horses tethered at the edge of town and proceeding on foot. The streets were quiet, most businesses closed, though light and music spilled from the saloons where miners sought relaxation after a day's labor. They separated as planned, Fletcher moving directly toward the church, while Cooper and Zara circled around to approach from the rear. From their position in the shadows, they could see the church silhouetted against the night sky, its steeple reaching toward the stars like a finger pointing to heaven. Minutes passed with agonizing slowness. Then, as promised, a brief flash of light appeared at the church door, Fletcher's signal that the way was clear. "Stay close," Cooper whispered, drawing his pistol as they emerged from hiding. They approached cautiously, alert for any sign of danger. The church door stood slightly ajar, a faint light visible within. Cooper pushed the door open wider, revealing Fletcher standing inside with another man, Silas Morgan, looking nervous but determined. "It's clear," Fletcher confirmed as they entered. Morgan came alone. Cooper's hand remained on his pistol as he faced the foreman, the man he believed had played a role in his brother's death. "You have something to tell us?" he asked, his voice cold. Morgan nodded, his weathered face drawn with what appeared to be genuine remorse. "About the mine, yes. And about your brother, Walsh. I've carried the truth long enough." Fletcher produced a notebook and pencil. "Start from the beginning, Mr. Morgan, and understand that this statement may be used in court proceedings against your employer." "Ex-employer," Morgan corrected grimly. "Once he learns I've talked to you, I'm as good as dead if I stay in Coloma." For the next hour, Morgan detailed Blackwell's systematic fraud, the dual bookkeeping system, the underreporting of gold extraction, the bribes to local officials. He confirmed every suspicion Zara and Cooper had formed, adding details that made the case against Blackwell even stronger. Then he turned to the matter of Caleb Walsh's death, his voice dropping as if the weight of the confession physically pressed down upon him. "Your brother wasn't killed in an accident," he told Cooper directly. "Blackwell ordered it. Caleb had discovered discrepancies in the reports, started asking questions. Blackwell couldn't risk him talking to investors." Cooper's face had gone pale, his knuckles white where he gripped his pistol. "Who did it?" he asked, his voice barely controlled. Morgan looked down at his hands. "Williams and Tanner, two of Blackwell's most loyal men. They staged the cave-in to make it look like an accident. I helped cover it up. I'm not proud of that, but Blackwell made it clear I'd be next if I didn't play along." The confession hung in the air, heavy and terrible. Zara moved to Cooper's side, placing a gentle hand on his arm, feeling the tremors of rage and grief that ran through him. "They'll pay for it," she whispered. All of them. We'll make sure of it. Fletcher continued taking notes, his expression grim. This testimony, combined with the ledger, is enough to arrest Blackwell on multiple charges. Federal charges, beyond the reach of his influence in Coloma. Morgan seemed to sag with relief, as if unburdening himself of the truth had physically lightened his load. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we get you safely out of town," Fletcher replied, closing his notebook. "You'll be taken to Sacramento to make a formal deposition, then placed under protection until the trial." They were preparing to leave when the church door burst open. Silas Morgan's eyes widened in terror as Daniel Blackwell himself stepped into the church, flanked by two armed men, presumably the Williams and Tanner who had murdered Caleb Walsh. "Well, well," Blackwell said, his voice deceptively pleasant. "What a touching scene of confession." "I'm disappointed in you, Silas, after everything I've done for you." Fletcher moved to stand between Blackwell and the others, his badge clearly visible on his vest. "Daniel Blackwell, I'm placing you under arrest for fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit murder." Blackwell smiled coldly. "I think not, Marshal. You see, in Coloma, I am the law." He nodded to his men, who raised their rifles. "Kill them all. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion to Zara. Cooper shoved her behind a pew as the first shots rang out. Fletcher drew his weapon with impressive speed, firing twice and hitting one of Blackwell's men in the shoulder. Morgan dove for cover behind the altar, unarmed and terrified. Cooper returned fire, his shots precise despite the chaos. The second gunman cried out and fell, his rifle clattering to the floor. Blackwell himself had pulled a revolver and was aiming at Fletcher when a new figure appeared in the doorway behind him. "Drop your weapon, Blackwell," shouted Sheriff Miller, his own gun trained on the mine owner's back. "It's over." Confusion crossed Blackwell's face as he turned to see the sheriff, the same man who had been in his pocket for years, now standing against him. In that moment of hesitation, Fletcher lunged forward, knocking the revolver from Blackwell's hand and forcing him to the ground. "What the hell, Miller?" Blackwell spat as the sheriff entered and helped Fletcher secure him with handcuffs. "We had an arrangement." Sheriff Miller's expression was grim. "That arrangement didn't include murder when Morgan came to me today with what really happened to the Walsh boy." "Well, some lines shouldn't be crossed, even for money." As the immediate danger passed, Zara emerged from behind the pew, shaking but unhurt. Cooper was at her side instantly, his hands checking her for injuries with gentle concern. "I'm fine," she assured him, though her voice trembled slightly. "Are you hurt?" "Not a scratch," Cooper replied, his eyes never leaving her face as if reassuring himself she truly was unharmed. Fletcher and Sheriff Miller had Blackwell and his surviving gunman securely bound now. The wounded man was receiving basic first aid from Morgan, who seemed eager to prove his change of heart. "Marshal," Miller addressed Fletcher, "I've got men outside ready to escort the prisoners to the jail. It's more secure than it looks, and I personally vouch that they'll reach Sacramento for proper trial." Fletcher studied the sheriff for a moment, then nodded. "I'll hold you to that, Miller. These men face federal charges. Any irregularities in their detention will be thoroughly investigated." As Blackwell was led away, he fixed his gaze on Zara with such hatred that she instinctively stepped closer to Cooper. "This isn't over, Palmer," Blackwell snarled. "No woman takes what's mine and lives to enjoy it." "That's enough," Sheriff Miller said sharply, pushing Blackwell toward the door. "You've done enough damage for one lifetime." After the prisoners were taken away, Fletcher turned to Zara and Cooper with a weary smile. It seems Sheriff Miller had a crisis of conscience today. Morgan went to him before coming here, told him everything. Miller decided to set up his own trap for Blackwell. I never thought I'd be grateful to that corrupt badge, Cooper admitted, his arm still protectively around Zara's waist. People can surprise you, Fletcher observed, for better or worse. He gathered his notebook and hat. I need to oversee the prisoner's processing. You too should get some rest. It's been a long day, and there will be statements to give tomorrow. After Fletcher departed, Cooper and Zara found themselves alone in the church, the aftermath of the gunfight evident in the scattered pews and bullet holes in the walls. Morgan had gone with the sheriff, eager to formalize his testimony. "It's over," Zara said softly, the reality of their victory still sinking in. "Blackwell will face justice. Your brother can rest in peace." Cooper nodded, emotion tightening his features. "And your father's legacy is secure. The mine shares will revert to you once the fraud is proven in court." Zara turned to face him fully, taking his hands in hers. "None of this would have happened if you hadn't been there that day at the ravine, if you hadn't offered me your hand." Cooper's expression softened as he gazed down at her. "I think perhaps we were meant to find each other, Zara Palmer. Your wagon didn't roll into that ravine by mere chance. Providence," Zara suggested with a small smile, "or fate," Cooper agreed. "Either way, I'm grateful for whatever force brought us together." In the quiet of the church, with moonlight streaming through the windows and the danger finally past, Cooper drew Zara into his arms. His kiss was tender yet passionate, a promise of the future now opening before them. "When we discussed new beginnings last night," Cooper said when they finally parted, his forehead resting against hers, "I had something specific in mind." "Oh," Zara prompted, her heart racing at the intensity in his blue eyes. Cooper took a deep breath, then spoke with simple, heartfelt honesty. "I love you, Zara. I think I've loved you since the moment you stubbornly insisted you could manage that wagon on your own, even as it was sliding into the ravine." He smiled at the memory, then grew serious again. "I know it's fast, perhaps too fast by proper Boston standards. But out here, life moves at its own pace, and I don't want to waste another day not asking you to be my wife." Tears of joy sprang to Zara's eyes. "Cooper Walsh," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "nothing about our meeting has followed proper Boston standards. And I wouldn't change a moment of it." She reached up to touch his face, tracing the scar on his cheekbone with gentle fingers. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you, and I can't imagine a future without you in it." Their lips met again, sealing the promise between them. As they stood embraced in the moonlit church, the dangers and trials of the past days faded into memory, replaced by the bright promise of the life they would build together. Epilogue: 3 years later, the autumn sun cast golden light across the veranda of the Palmer Walsh ranch house, where Zara sat rocking their 6-month-old son, Edward Cooper Walsh, named for both his grandfathers. The sprawling property, located halfway between Coloma and Placerville, had been their home for the past 2 years, built with proceeds from Zara's rightful share of the Sunrise Mine. After Blackwell's conviction and imprisonment, Zara had sold her interest in the mine to the other investors, preferring to use the funds to establish something new and untainted. The ranch had been Cooper's idea, a place where he could use his knowledge of the land while remaining close enough to the settlements for Zara's comfort. "There's my boys," Zara said warmly as Cooper appeared around the corner of the house, leading their 2-year-old son Caleb by the hand. The toddler broke free at the sight of his mother, running on unsteady legs across the veranda. "Mama," he exclaimed, reaching up to pat his baby brother's foot. "Eddie sleep. Just resting," Zara replied, shifting the infant so his brother could see his face. "Did you help Papa with the horses?" Caleb nodded enthusiastically, his dark curls so like his father's bouncing with the movement. Big horse, I brush, Cooper chuckled, joining his family on the veranda bench. He's a natural with the animals. Gets that from his mother, I think. Me, Zara laughed. I was a city girl when we met, if you recall. A city girl who adapted to the wilderness with remarkable speed, Cooper replied, slipping an arm around her shoulders. Who insisted on learning to ride properly, to shoot, to manage a ranch ledger better than any accountant. Zara leaned into his embrace, contentment washing over her. I had an excellent teacher. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun begin its descent toward the Sierra Nevada mountains. Their ranch hands were finishing the day's work in the distance, preparing for the evening meal in the bunkhouse. It was a good life, challenging at times, but deeply satisfying. A rider appeared on the road leading to their property, and Cooper straightened, his hand instinctively moving toward the rifle that was never far from reach, a habit from their dangerous early days together. "Expecting anyone?" he asked. Zara shook her head, then squinted at the approaching figure. "Wait, I think it's Samuel." Indeed, as the rider drew closer, they recognized Samuel Thornton, who had remained a dear friend through the years. After Blackwell's downfall, Thornton had been appointed the official accountant for Coloma's mining operations, ensuring fair practices were maintained. "Samuel," Cooper called as their friend dismounted. "This is an unexpected pleasure." Thornton removed his hat, smiling broadly as he climbed the veranda steps. "I was on my way back from Sacramento and thought I'd stop by." His expression softened as he saw the baby in Zara's arms. "And this must be young Edward, may I?" Zara carefully transferred the infant to Thornton's arms, smiling as the former schoolteacher's face lit up with delight. "He's grown so much since I saw him last," Thornton observed. "Children have a way of doing that," Cooper replied, lifting Caleb onto his lap. "What brings you to Sacramento?" "Business or pleasure?" A hint of excitement entered Thornton's eyes. "Both, actually. I've been appointed to the new Mining Regulatory Commission." And he paused for effect. "I've asked Martha Holloway to marry me." "She accepted." "Samuel, that's wonderful news," Zara exclaimed, genuinely pleased. The boarding house proprietress and the accountant had been courting for nearly 2 years. "When is the wedding?" "Spring," Thornton replied. "We'd be honored if you all would attend. In fact, Martha has a special request, Zara. She'd like you to stand with her, as you were the one who introduced us properly." "I'd be delighted," Zara assured him, remembering how she had arranged a dinner for the shy accountant and the widow after noticing their mutual admiration. As they caught up on the latest news from Coloma and Sacramento, Zara found herself reflecting on the remarkable journey that had led to this moment. From the terrifying day her wagon had teetered on the edge of disaster to now a beloved husband, 2 beautiful sons, a prosperous ranch and dear friends. All because a cowboy had climbed down a ravine and said, "Give me your hand." Later that evening, after their sons were tucked into bed and Samuel was settled in the guest room, Zara and Cooper stood on the veranda watching the stars emerge in the vast western sky. "Happy?" Cooper asked softly, his arms encircling her from behind. Zara leaned back against his chest, savoring the solid strength of him. "Completely," she replied. "Though I was thinking about that day at the ravine, how differently everything might have turned out if you hadn't come along when you did." Cooper pressed a kiss to her temple. "I thank God every day for leading me to that spot at that moment." "As do I," Zara murmured, turning in his arms to face him. Time had only deepened her love for this man, his courage, his integrity, his tenderness with their sons, his unwavering partnership in building their life together. "You know," Cooper said thoughtfully, "in all our adventures, all our challenges, you never once gave up. From the moment I met you, You faced every obstacle with the same determination you showed that day, insisting you could manage on your own even as that wagon was about to tumble into oblivion. Zara laughed softly. Well, I'm very glad I accepted your help in the end. As am I, Cooper agreed, his blue eyes warm with love as he gazed down at her. Because the moment you took my hand, Zara Palmer, was the moment my life truly began. Under the vast canopy of stars, their lips met in a kiss that still held all the passion and promise of their first embrace, a testament to the love that had begun with a broken wagon, a dangerous ravine, and a cowboy's outstretched hand.